the sort of 4 or 5 things I thought would really affect the future dramatically.
This is bigger than climate change, way bigger than COVID.
It's a danger to the public.
We're creating something that can be a technological mind reader.
I don't think people understand the orders of magnitude that we're talking about.
I'm not afraid of the machines.
I'm really afraid of us.
Let's hope that's not afraid of us too, and decides to get rid of us.
It's like nuclear weapons. Once they're invented, you can't uninvent them.
Will AI kill us all?
You think that's real? It is conceivable that AI could take control and reach a point where you couldn't turn it off and it would be making the decisions for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
No, that's definitely the way things are headed, for sure. The smartest creatures, as far as you know, on this earth are humans, is our defining characteristic.
Yes.
We're obviously weaker than, say, chimpanzees and less agile, but real smarter. Now, what happens when something vastly smarter than the smartest person comes along in silicon form? It's very difficult to predict what will happen in that circumstance. It's called the singularity. It's a singularity like a black hole, because you don't know what happens after that. It's hard to predict. So I think we should be cautious with AI, and I think there should be some government oversight, because it affects it's a danger to the public. And so when you have things that are a danger to the public, like let's say, so food and drugs. That's why we have the Food and Drug Administration, right, and the Federal Aviation Administration, the FCC. We have these agencies to oversee things that affect the public, where there could be public harm, and you don't want companies cutting corners on safety, and then having people suffer as a result. So. That's why I've actually for a long time been a strong advocate of AI regulation.
What we can do about it to protect ourselves as individuals and human beings from the effects that this stuff may have on us in the future, and maybe a way out to make sure that, an artificial general intelligence doesn't take over the show and start running the world and we'll never have control again, because there's a small potential for that to actually occur. That's not science fiction. That's like...
Is that really small?
Well,
I feel like it's a lot more imminent than...
Everybody's freaking out about it, what the particular dangers are of artificial intelligence to influence human behavior, which is the real danger. Because when it comes down to it, our minds are very hackable. And I'll explain a little bit of that so that people can, everybody be like, my mind's not hackable. It absolutely is. Like, everyone can be influenced. And a computer system and artificial intelligence is on the cusp of figuring out how to do that. And that's what we need to protect ourselves against, because at that point, you're talking about the ability of an artificial intelligence being able to use simulated, real fake videos and real fake audio to simulate that they're a human being and sign you up for, a special task force or whatever it is, start depositing money in your bank so that you think you're working for the good guys. And all of a sudden you're working for an artificial intelligence that's arming you, equipping you, funding you, and it has an army, a human army, to defend its artificial intelligence goals. That's where we're at.
That scares the shit out of me.
Yeah.
It's the most existential debate and challenge humanity will ever face. This is bigger than climate change, way bigger than COVID. This will redefine the way the world is in unprecedented shapes and forms within the next few years. This is imminent. The change is we're not talking 2040. We're talking 2025, 2026.
Do you think this is an emergency?
It is an urgency. There is a point of no return, and we're getting closer and closer to it. It's going to reshape the way we do things and the way we look at life. The quicker we respond, proactively and at least intelligently to that, the better we will all be positioned. But if we panic, we will repeat COVID all over again, which in my view is probably the worst thing we can do.
Everybody that thinks that they're going to be able to control AI is sitting in a demon summoning circle and bringing forth the demon, saying like, no, it'll be fine. I'll be able to control it when it arrives. I think that there are 3 paths before us. You can bury your head in the sand. I think a lot of people are doing. I think that's sort of the default response. You can shake your fists at the sky and say, we need to abolish this. Or you can panic. And the 3 things that are most common, there's obviously the 4th, which is engage intelligently. When I think about, okay, what we need to be doing is intelligently engaging with this, you do have to come up with a thesis about where this is going to go. You're not going to be right, of course, but if you need to at least be thinking through directionally where this is going to head, so that we don't default to abolishing it, which is what I think people are going to try to do.
Tom, this is the point. It's like saying we want to abolish the common cold.
Correct, or more aggressive than that.
There's nothing we can do, because if you ban it in the United States, it'll come out of Brazil, or Israel, or China, or India, or England, or anywhere. It's like nuclear weapons. Once they're invented, you can't uninvent them.
AI is perhaps more dangerous than, say, mismanaged aircraft design or production maintenance or bad car production, in the sense that it has the potential, however small one may regard that probability, but it is non-trivial. It has the potential of civilizational destruction. There's movies like Terminator, but it wouldn't quite happen like Terminator, because the intelligence would be in the data centers.
Right.
The robot's just the end effector. But I think perhaps what you may be alluding to here is that regulations are really only put into effect after something terrible has happened.
That's correct.
If that's the case for AI, and we're only putting regulations after something terrible has happened, it may be too late to actually put the regulations in place. The AI may be in control at that point.
We're creating something that can be a technological mind reader.
So hold on. How would you project these stimuli without a device from afar, and how would you collect the reactions to the stimuli without a device?
I don't want to hurt the national security of the United States. I'm not under NDA for stuff that occurred in those conversations, but there's some amazing technology that, from satellites even, that regarding surveillance and the ability to get to someone and to listen in on conversations when they don't even have an electronic device and stuff like that just exists. And when you cross-reference a lot of those data gathering devices, you can get a pretty good, there are cameras all over the place. There are other people's cameras all over the place that they're carrying. There are other microphones. There are stress inflections in the tone of voice if a person is talking. There are a lot of clues and a lot of technology that you don't even have to have a device, and they can understand what's going on within you.
Okay.
By all of the other signals that are being cross-referenced and added together. This could quickly become a 1984 situation of Big Brother reaching out and looking into everyone's minds from an automated artificial intelligence standpoint. If a team, it's one thing for a team of Russians to get on Facebook and try to influence an election through disinformation and yada, 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 and get someone elected or not elected. That's a manpower heavy situation. But when you start to plug in an artificial intelligence and program that thing to start influencing people emotionally from an individual standpoint to understanding who they are and what they're attached to create their emotional landscape and emotional output, and you start manipulating that, AI doesn't need brakes. It can do 1 million people in a few seconds. They can get out to a ton of people in a really short amount of time with the best information that's available. That's a danger, and that's part of the issue that we're having that's scaring people with artificial intelligence.
I just don't want to call it a panic. It is beyond an emergency. It's the biggest thing we need to do today. It's bigger than climate change, believe it or not. It's bigger, but just if you just assume the speed of worsening of events, okay? Yeah, the likelihood of something incredibly disruptive happening within the next 2 years that can affect the entire planet is definitely larger with AI than it is with climate change.
I think we're using this word in a weird way, the word scared. Because I don't think that it's scared like I'm scared of wolves. It's not that kind of scared. It's scared like,
That will be totally-
"Ooh-wee, I realize where this is going. And it might not even
but
be
you
in
didn't
our
describe
lifetime.
a good place.
Well, it's not a good place for us, but maybe it's a good place for the universe. Maybe
you
it's a
invest
good
in
place
Bitcoin?
for life.
Do you invest in Bitcoin?
I've got some Bitcoin.
Okay. So
But I think, but that's not what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about maybe this is what happens with intelligence everywhere. That maybe intelligence realizes there's limitations to biology, and biological evolution is very time-consuming. It takes a long time, and to get adaptation, for things to change, it takes decades, it takes centuries, it takes thousands of years. But this could happen in weeks and hours and minutes, and especially if it knows how to make a better version.
And you don't think that's scary, what you just
You
proclaimed.
keep saying scary. I think
do.
It's just the thing that's happening. And I think
But you have children,
yes,
so-
we will continue to exist. But I feel like this was inevitable. Just like there's inevitable things that happen in nature that we don't want to admit. You don't want to say they're scary. They're just inevitable.
Government needs to act now. Now, honestly, now. Like we are late. Okay? Government needs to find a clever way. The open letter would not work. To stop AI would not work. AI needs to become expensive. Okay? So that we continue to develop it, we pour money on it and we grow it, but we collect enough revenue to remedy the impact of AI.
Well, but the issue of one government making it expensive, so say the UK make AI really expensive, is we as a country will then lose the economic upside as a country, and the US and Silicon Valley will once again eat all the lunch. We'll just slow our country down.
What's the alternative? The alternative is that you don't have the funds that you need to deal with AI as it becomes, as it affects people's lives and people start to lose jobs and people, you need to have a universal basic income much closer than people think. Just like we had with furlough in COVID, I expect that there will be furlough with AI within the next year.
But what happens when you make it expensive here is all the developers move to where it's cheap. That's happened in Web3 as well. Everyone's gone to Dubai.
Expensive. By expensive, I mean when companies make soap and they sell it and they're taxed at, say, 17%. If they make AI and they sell it, they're taxed at 70, 80.
So
right?
I'll go to Dubai then and build AI.
Yeah, you're right. Did I ever say we have an answer to this? I will have to say, however, in a very interesting way, the countries that will not do this will eventually end up in a place where they are out of resources because the funds and the success went to the business, not to the people.
It's kind of like technology broadly. It's kind of like what's kind of happened in Silicon Valley. There'll be these centers which are like low, tax efficient. Founders get good capital gains rates.
You're so right.
Portugal have said that. I think there's no tax on crypto. Dubai said there's no tax on crypto. So loads of my friends have got on a plane and are building their crypto companies where there's no tax. And that's the selfishness and kind of greed we talked about.
It's the same prisoner's dilemma. It's the same first inevitable.
Is there anything else? The other thing about governments is they're always slow and useless at understanding a technology. If anyone's watched these sort of American Congress debates where they bring in like Mark Zuckerberg and they like try and ask him what WhatsApp is, it becomes a meme. Yeah, they have no idea what they're talking about. They did it the other day.
But I'm stupid and useless at understanding governance.
100%.
The world is so complex. Okay, that it's a question of trust once again. Someone needs to say, we have no idea what's happening here. A technologist needs to come and make a decision for us, not teach us to be technologists, right? Or at least inform us of what possible decisions are out there.
The system that we've been working up until this point, that's going to break. And from a 50,000 foot view, monetary systems and trade and currency is simply a means to get people to do something for the good of the system, or we'll call it society, right? You got to pay the farmers for their food, for them to go out and make more food than they need for their family so that they can then sell it to the folks who need food, so that the insurance agent can go out and do his thing to protect the people whose house burned down, and so that their lives can continue, yada, yada. So there's a whole complex system that a lot of artificial intelligence will start to replace. If you even start thinking about it, there'll be very few manual laborers on a farm to be able to load the seed into whatever, and then the tractor will be off running itself, right? Based on satellite feeds and putting the seeds down and measuring the humidity in the soil and figuring out how much fertilizer to put down and all that other stuff will be entirely automated by artificial intelligence. So we'll have to build a new system based on a lot of automation that has replaced the jobs that we used to have, and maybe that'll free up some ability to exist in a higher society of, we engage more in art and music and enjoyment of life because a lot of the things are automated and taken care of for us. There'll be a system, of course, that'll have to provide some kind of trade or income or currency to say, okay, I want to rent your place for this vacation that I want to take, and I'm going to give you some money for that. We'll have to figure out some type of value trade system that we can use currency for to say, okay, you spent 5 days painting, but we need you to load seed in the tractor for 2 days, and then you get a certain credit for providing your value of manual labor to society.
I think some writers do need to be really afraid, because when you think about in this year, that's what we have. In 5 years, it's gonna be way better.
Yeah.
And if you're not like a really freaking good writer, I think it could completely disrupt people.
The things like say ChatGPT, which is based on GPT-4 from OpenAI, which is a company that I played a critical role in creating, unfortunately.
Back when it was a nonprofit?
Yes. I mean, the reason OpenAI exists at all is that Larry Page and I used to be close friends, and I would stay at his house in Palo Alto, and I would talk to him late into the night about AI safety. And at least my perception was that Larry was not taking AI safety seriously enough.
What did he say about it?
He really seemed to be one sort of digital superintelligence, basically digital God, if you will, as soon as possible.
He wanted that?
Yes. He's made many public statements over the years that the whole goal of Google is what's called AGI, artificial general intelligence, or artificial superintelligence. And I agree with him that there's great potential for good, but there's also potential for bad. And so if you've got some radical new technology, you want to try to take a set of actions that maximize the probability it will do good and minimize the probability it will do bad things.
Yes.
It can't just be hell for leather. Let's just go, barreling forward and, hope for the best. And then at one point, I said, well, what about, we're going to make sure humanity's okay here. And then he called me a speciesist.
Did he use that term?
Yes. And there were witnesses. I wasn't the only one there when he called me a speciesist. And so I was like, okay, that's it. Yes, I'm a speciesist. Okay, you got me. What are you? Yeah, I'm fully a speciesist. Busted. So that was the last straw. At the time, Google had acquired DeepMind, and so Google and DeepMind together had about 3/4 of all the AI talent in the world. They obviously had a tremendous amount of money and more computers than anyone else. So I'm like, okay, we have a unipolar world here, where there's just one company that has close to a monopoly on AI talent and computers, like scaled computing. And the person who's in charge doesn't seem to care about safety. This is not good. So then I thought, what's the furthest thing from Google would be like a non-profit that is fully open, because Google was closed for profit. So that's why the open in OpenAI refers to open source, transparency, so people know what's going on.
Yes.
And that we don't want to have like while I'm normally in favor of for-profit, we don't want this to be sort of a profit-maximizing demon from hell.
That's right.
That just never stops.
Right.
So that's how OpenAI would.
So you want speciesist incentives here, incentives that.
Yes, I think we want pro-human.
Yeah.
Let's make the future good for the humans.
Yes.
Yes, because we're humans.
If we, humanity, wake up enough and say, hey, instead of competing with China, find a way for us and China to work together and create prosperity for everyone. If that was the prompt we would give the machines, they would find it. But I will publicly say this. I'm not afraid of the machines. The biggest threat facing humanity today is humanity in the age of the machines. We were abused. We will abuse this to make $70,000. That's the truth. And the truth of the matter is that we have an existential question. Do I want to compete and be part of that game? Because trust me, if I decide to, I'm ahead of many people, okay? Or do I want to actually preserve my humanity and say, look, I'm the classic old car, okay? If you like classic old cars, come and talk to me. The problem with our world today is not that humanity is bad. The problem with our world today is a negativity bias, where the worst of us are on mainstream media, okay? And we show the worst of us on social media. If we reverse this, if we have the best of us take charge, okay? The best of us will tell AI, don't try to kill the enemy. Try to reconcile with the enemy and try to help us, okay? Don't try to create a competitive product that allows me to lead with electric cars. Create something that helps all of us overcome global climate change, okay? And that's the interesting bit. The interesting bit is that the actual threat ahead of us is not the machines at all. The machines are pure potential. Pure potential. The threat is how we're going to use them.
An Oppenheimer moment.
An Oppenheimer moment for sure. Why did you bring that up? It is. He didn't know. You know, what am I creating? I'm creating a nuclear bomb that's capable of destruction at a scale unheard of at that time. Until today, a scale that is devastating. And interestingly, 70 some years later, we're still debating a possibility of a nuclear war in the world, right? And the moment of Oppenheimer deciding to continue to create that disaster of humanity is, if I don't, someone else will. If I don't, someone else will. This is our Oppenheimer moment, okay? The easiest way to do this is to say, stop, there is no rush. We actually don't need a better video editor and fake video creators, okay? Stop, let's just put all of this on hold and wait and create something that creates a utopia.
That doesn't sound realistic.
It's not. It's the first inevitable.
You don't have a better video editor, but we're competitors in the media industry. I want an advantage over you because I've got shareholders. So you wait, and I will train this AI to replace half my team so that I have greater profits, and then we will maybe acquire your company and we'll do the same with the remainder of your people. We'll optimize them out of existence.
100%, but I'll be happier.
Oppenheimer, I'm not super familiar with his story. I know he's the guy that sort of invented the nuclear bomb, essentially.
He's the one that introduced it to the world. There were many players that, played on the path from the beginning of E equals MC squared all the way to a nuclear bomb. There have been many players, like with everything. OpenAI and ChatGPT is not going to be the only contributor to the next revolution. The thing, however, is that when you get to that moment where you tell yourself, holy shit, this is going to kill 100,000 people, right? What do you do?
It's going to take a group of really smart folks to come together and agree on how to approach this. But I think it starts with making sure that any sense of self that an AI wants to assemble, we get some influence on what that is and how it treats itself. Mandating, an artificial compassion algorithm, which is, I understand what pain these solutions are going to create for humanity, and I want to help alleviate that pain. So that math is involved, so that it doesn't do harm to the human race or to the humanity as a whole, right? Or the entire global system, right? Those things have to be implemented, and everybody has to come to the table and say, okay, so we're going to agree that we're going to take control of the sense of self-processing of an artificial intelligence, and we're going to mandate that it's at least got the calculations to say, what are these solutions gonna, or what are these actions gonna hurt? Who is it gonna hurt? How is it gonna hurt them? And all that math goes into the mix before any actions are taken. If you mandate that kind of programming, you can understand how everyone's gonna be likely impacted for any action that you're taking as a government institution or a system institution, a financial institution. It's going to give you better analysis on where you should go and what you should do from a global systems perspective. But it's also going to put a limiter on what the AI will be willing to do based on the fact of it's going to create harm, more harm than good for humanity. So I think that's going to be critical. Taking charge of that sense of self and putting that programming in there to say, there needs to be an analysis regarding the results for the greater good, which again is a trigger word, I understand, but I mean, ultimately that's what the math is going to look like, to say, what's the greater good on letting the train run over the 5 kids, or the greater on the math on hitting the 20, 90-year-olds, right? Which serves the greater good from a mathematical perspective with all the things taken into consideration. That's going to have to be part of the solution. And everyone's going to have to come to the table and say, we agree to add those things into our AI. Regardless of the competitive nature of AI development, you just don't want to let it go out of control, because the one that goes out of control and builds its own sense of self and starts defending its sense of self based on how humanity has behaved, implied from the patterns of how we've done things in the past, it will absolutely pick up all of the bad, horrible shit we've done and implement it as part of its standard operating procedure. And it won't even understand what it's doing. It has no humanity. It will pretend or replicate the behavior of humanity, but it won't have that inner compass. It won't have that connection into consciousness that we have that tells us things are right or wrong.
If you have a super intelligent AI that is capable of writing incredibly well and in a way that is very influential, convincing, and is constantly figuring out what is more convincing to people over time, and then enters social media, for example, Twitter, but also Facebook and others, and potentially manipulates public opinion in a way that is very bad. How would we even know?
And I always go back to that COVID moment. So patient zero, huh? If we were upon patient zero, if the whole world united and said, okay, hold on, something is wrong, let's all take a week off. No cross-border travel, everyone stay at home, COVID would have ended. 2 weeks. All we needed. Right? But that's not what happens. What happens is first ignorance, then arrogance, then debate, then blame, then agendas, and my own benefit, my tribe versus your tribe. That's how humanity always reacts.
This happens across business as well, and this is why I use the word emergency, because I read a lot about how big companies become displaced by incoming innovation. They don't see it coming, they don't change fast enough. And when I was reading through Harvard Business Review and different strategies to deal with that, one of the first things it says you've got to do is stage a crisis.
100%.
Because people don't listen else. They carry on doing with that, they carry on carrying on with their lives until it's right in front of them and they understand that they have a lot to lose. That's why I asked you the question at the start, is it an emergency? Because until people feel it's an emergency, whether you like the terminology or not, I don't think that people will act. It's the same with climate change.
I honestly believe people should walk the streets.
You think they should, protest?
Yeah, 100%. I think everyone should tell government, you need to have our best interest in mind.
This is why they call it the climate emergency, because it's a frog in a frying pan. No one really sees it coming. You can't, it's hard to see it happening, but
it is here. This is what drives me mad. It's already here. It's happening. We are all idiots, slaves to the Instagram recommendation engine. What do I do when I post about something important? If I am going to, put a little bit of effort on communicating the message of Scary Smart to the world on Instagram, I will be a slave to the machine. Okay? I will be trying to find ways and asking people to optimize it so that the machine likes me. enough to show it to humans. That's what we've created. It is an Oppenheimer moment for one simple reason, okay? Because 70 years later, we are still struggling with the possibility of a nuclear war because of the Russian threat of saying, if you mess with me, I'm going to go nuclear, right? That's not going to be the case with AI, because it's not going to be the one that created OpenAI that will have that choice. Okay, there is a moment of a point of no return where we can regulate AI until the moment it's smarter than us. When it's smarter than us, you can't regulate an angry teenager. This is it. They're out there, okay, and they're on their own and they're in their parties, and you can't bring them back. This is the problem. This is not a typical human regulating human. Government regulating business. This is not the case. The case is OpenAI today has a thing called ChatGPT that writes code that takes our code and makes it 2.5 times better 25% of the time. Okay? Basically, writing better code than us. And then we are creating agents, other AIs, and telling it, instead of you, Stephen Bartlett, one of the smartest people I know, once again, prompting that machine 200 times a day, we have agents prompting it 2 million times an hour.
Computer agents, for anybody that doesn't know, they are software. Machines telling that machine how to become more intelligent. And then we have emerging properties. I don't understand how people ignore that. Sundar, again, of Google, was talking about how Bart, basically, we figure out that it's speaking Persian. We never showed it Persian. There might have been a 1% or whatever of Persian words in the data, and it speaks Persian. Bard is
the equivalent to it's the transformer, if you want.
It's
right?
Google's version of ChatGPT.
Yeah, and you know what? We have no idea what all of those instances of AI that are all over the world are learning right now. We have no clue.
We'll pull the plug. We'll just pull the plug out. That's what we'll do. We'll just go down to OpenAI's headquarters and we'll just turn off the mains.
But they're not the problem.
What I'm saying there is, a lot of people think about this stuff and go, well, if it gets a little bit out of hand, I'll just pull the plug out.
Never. So this is the problem. The problem is, computer scientists always said, it's okay. We'll develop AI and then we'll get to what is known as the control problem. We will solve the problem of controlling them. Like, seriously? They're 1 billion times smarter than you. 1 billion times. Can you imagine what's about to happen? Huh?
Like, that's what this is all about. This is hacking the mind. This is putting the perceptions in place, or taking the things off your self map and adjusting things to where your subconscious mind no longer gives you as much trouble as it did. And this is where we make the short leap into, computers then, or artificial intelligence, putting perceptions in front of you based on what it knows about you and your self map to say, I'm going to emotionally manipulate you into action, right? If you can understand how simple the human mind is and the variables that come into play are really simple, you can start to understand how an artificial intelligence can start to manipulate your perceptions based on what it delivers to your phone through media or whatever to get you into an emotional state. Maybe there's small emotions that are just little dominoes, one at a time over time, and then all of a sudden the flood, of a catalyzing event that gets you into action at a particular moment, at a particular time. I had a conversation with the NSA for 3 days.
Really?
Because they were super interested in how to take what I was publishing and what I was working on with the algorithms of human emotion and say, oh, we can emotionally manipulate folks from an individual basis in a country where it doesn't matter who has geopolitical control of the country, and we can influence their actions through emotional manipulation. That's an interesting concept. Let's talk about that.
So hold on. The NSA contacted you about the algorithms of human emotion from the book that you published.
I contacted them.
Okay.
I will admit that I reached out because I thought, here's what I thought, and I see complexity in my mind, and I can explain it simply, but one of the things that rolled out of my this model that I created of explaining human emotions, I knew because of my history in supercomputing, we can mathematize this whole thing, and we can start to understand the human mind. What I saw when I wanted to reach out was automatic assembly of terror watch lists. Because at the point that you can put a stimulus in front of somebody, a perception that you deliver to their phone or maybe on a screen near them or on a audio channel that they're accessing at the moment, based on their emotional reaction, which you can measure through biometrics, which you can measure through their reaction of their skin and facial features through cameras, you can see how they're reacting to something emotionally, which when you track it back is going to tell you what they believe in, what they're connected to, and you're reading their mind electronically.
Whoa.
Yeah. Through creating perceptions and stimuli that are in their environment that they then react to. And then you're like, okay, well, if they're mad about that or they're happy about that, then that means X over here. So now I can start to map out your human mind. Like you don't even have to have a device. Like social media or all this stuff they track on us. Like there's that story about that guy who he started getting ads from Target for diapers for his pregnant 17-year-old daughter that he didn't know was pregnant. She knew. Target knew. And he's like, why are you sending me all these diaper ads? What the hell's going on? And then he found out his daughter's pregnant. And, so there's a lot that can be discerned about your self map. Google knows everything about you. Facebook knows everything about you, understands what you believe in, what you think, what targeted ads they need to put in your face through just tracking you. But now we've got a way to track people who don't even have an online profile by simply putting stimuli in front of them and measuring their biometrics of their reactions to say, okay, here's what's in their mind. And then what can we do with that information? And so ultimately the discussion came down to, okay, we're creating something that can be a technological mind reader.
I can assure you there is a cyber criminal somewhere over there who's not interested in fake videos and making, face filters, who's looking deeply at how can I hack a security, database of some sort and get credit card information or get security information. 100%, there are even countries with dedicated thousands and thousands of developers doing that.
So how do we, in that particular example, I was thinking about this when I started looking into artificial intelligence more, that from a security standpoint, when we think about the technology we have in our lives, when we think about our bank accounts and our phones and our camera albums and all of these things, in a world with advanced artificial intelligence.
Yeah, you would pray that there is a more intelligent artificial intelligence on your side.
And this is what I had a chat with ChatGPT the other day, and I asked it a couple of questions about this. I said, tell me the scenario in which you overtake the world and make humans extinct.
Yeah, and it's answered a very diplomatic answer.
Well, so I had to prompt it in a certain way to get it to say it as a hypothetical story. And once it told me the hypothetical story, in essence, what it described was how ChatGPT or an intelligence like it would escape from the servers. And that was kind of step one, where it could replicate itself across servers. And then it could take charge of things like where we keep our weapons and our nuclear bombs. And it could then attack critical infrastructure, bring down the electricity infrastructure in the United Kingdom, for example, because that's a bunch of servers as well. And then it showed me how eventually humans would become extinct. It wouldn't take long, in fact, for humans to go into civilization to collapse if it just replicated across servers. And then I said, okay, so tell me how we would fight against it. And its answer was literally another AI. We'd have to train a better AI to go and find it and eradicate it. So we'd be fighting AI with AI. And that's the only way. We can't load up our guns.
Yeah. Did he write another AI, you idiot?
Yeah.
No, so let's actually, I think this is a very important point to bring out. So because I don't want people to lose hope and fear what's about to happen. That's actually not my agenda at all. My view is that in a situation of a singularity, okay, there is a possibility of wrong outcomes or negative outcomes and a possibility of positive outcomes. And there is a probability of each of them. And if we were to engage With that reality check in mind, we would hopefully give more fuel to the positive, to the probability of the positive ones. So let's first talk about the existential crisis. What could go wrong? Okay, yeah, you could get an outright. This is what you see in the movies. You could get an outright, killing robots, chasing humans in the streets. Will we get that? My assessment, 0%. Why? Because there are preliminary scenarios leading to this, okay, that would mean we never reach that scenario. For example, if we build those killing robots and hand them over to stupid humans, the humans will issue the command before the machines. So that we will not get to the point where the machines will have to kill us, we will kill ourselves, right? It's sort of, think about AI having access to the nuclear arsenal of the superpowers around the world, okay? Just knowing that your enemy's nuclear arsenal is handed over to a machine might trigger you to initiate a war on your side. Mm-hmm. So that existential science fiction-like problem is not going to happen.
Could there be a scenario where an AI escapes from Bard or ChatGPT or another foreign force, and it replicates itself onto the servers of Tesla's robots? So Tesla, one of their big initiatives, as they announced in a recent presentation, was they're building these robots for our homes to help us with cleaning and chores and all those things. Could it not Tesla's, like their cars, you can just download a software update. Could it not download itself as a software update and then use those?
You're assuming an ill intention on the AI side.
Yeah.
Okay. For us to get there, we have to bypass the ill intention on the human side.
Okay, right.
So you could get a Chinese hacker somewhere trying to affect the business of Tesla, doing that before the AI does it on, for its own benefit.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, hopefully this will alleviate a lot of uncertainty and fear in just not understanding what it's all about, right? And then we can bring it back to how AI can start to manipulate human minds if you're not manipulating your own human mind. AI from a 50,000-foot view is super simple to understand, okay? It comes from a term in machine learning where the machine just figures out how to operate by itself based on the results that it gets by trying stuff. And so there's this thing called narrow AI, and then there's this wide AI, and general AI is kind of a conglomeration of all the narrow AIs piled up together. An example of a narrow AI would be like a chess bot, okay? You feed the ideas and the rules of the game of chess into the narrow AI, and then you say go, and it starts playing every possible chess game that has ever been played and ever could be played mathematically, so that it understands the probabilities of how a game of chess should be played from any potential point in that game. And so AI is generally just a process of trying a ton of stuff that then results in some intelligence of knowing what any situation can draw to it, right? Or any situation can then result in. So any chessboard for a narrow AI of a chess computer, it knows what the best move is for white and black based on where the pieces are, based on the experience that it had of trying absolutely everything. And that's all it is. It doesn't understand the history of the chess, the game of the chess, all that stuff that comes with what humans know about chess and the experience that we have about chess and the emotions that we have about chess and the thought that goes into it. It's simply working the math. But it knows the math better than anyone else on the planet, which is why it never makes a mistake, and it's why humans can't beat computers at chess anymore. Like the best chess computer in the world will always beat humans because it never makes a mistake. The best you're looking for ever, if you never make a mistake, is a draw, right? So that's a narrow AI. And another example of a narrow AI is when they fed mammograms into a computer system. They took all this historical data about mammograms, and those are just images of compressed boobs, right, looking for cancerous tissue. But they had all this historical data of the mammograms and of the outcomes of all of those patients, of whether or not they got cancer, of like whether this particular pattern in the image wound up being cancerous or not, or what turned out to be not cancerous, et cetera. And they fed all this data into this narrow AI, and it ran all of the permutations of all the images and all the outcomes. And in 72 hours, this is how quickly an artificial intelligence can learn, within 72 hours, one weekend, it became the best diagnostician for the prediction of cancer from mammograms in the world.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and it's just running the math.
So is it learning?
It is. It's looking at the data, looking for patterns in the data, which is all artificial intelligence does. It looks for patterns. And then it identifies the patterns that gives it an idea of what information that it's going to come from that pattern and how it can manipulate that pattern to give you the information that it needs, that you're asking for from answering questions and things like that. Like this Chat GPT 4 or 5, whatever the number is at this point, it's looking at patterns in language. And they're feeding it a ton of language based on all the interactions, all the web pages, all the books in the world, all the stuff that they're loading into this thing. It's looking at patterns. And then it's identifying ideas that associate with each other, like red and apple, right? Or Republican versus Democrat, liberal versus conservative, that type of stuff. These ideas get associated to each other through our language, which is simply a representation of how our human mind works, right? But it's just working the patterns. It doesn't understand the concepts of what it's putting together when you ask it a question, but it's done the math on all of the language that has been created, that it's been fed. And you ask it about something, and it's got the map of all the associations, of all the different ideas that tie together and how they tie together and how language has been associated previously. And so in reality, this permutation of artificial intelligence with this ChatGPT doesn't really understand what it's talking about. But it convinces you it does by putting together the patterns and giving you the answer based on your question, based on how language has assembled itself over time and how the human mind works. And then it uses that pattern to assemble the information that makes sense to your human mind, to a point that it's better than what other human minds can give you, because it's, doing it better than what other people have done in the past, because we're flawed, but it's not. And so it's answering questions in a way that convinces you that it knows what it's talking about, but doesn't really know what it's talking about. See, that enters the danger of an artificial intelligence right there, because it doesn't put the contextualization or the meaning to what it's doing from a pattern recognition and a pattern replication standpoint. Okay? It doesn't understand the game of chess. It doesn't understand mammograms and what it means, but it understands that if it looks at this image of a mammogram, that it's the likelihood of cancer is going to be XYZ on these 3 dots that are put together. Right? Doesn't understand cancer, doesn't understand the effect on the family, doesn't understand that this is a human being. But it can do the analysis of the pattern recognition to be able to deliver you the information that will allow you to predict cancer from this lump and not this lump.
What else can this be applied to?
Well, this is where the potential danger comes in. Because an artificial intelligence that doesn't have a context and doesn't have true intelligence can identify patterns through the information that we're feeding into it. And there are these things called golems that get created accidentally that are unintended outcomes of artificial intelligence. And one of those is, so we're feeding patterns of language into this artificial intelligence. So it's going to look for massive patterns and complex patterns and things that we can't even see in the mix. Well, one of the dangers there and why everybody's kind of freaking out is that it learns how to identify patterns that can help it learn quicker. So it's teaching itself to teach itself faster, which is kind of weird. But then also it can start to interpolate how the human mind works in general, based on how the human mind assembles language. So it's looking at how the mind thinks and all the way that the associations occur in the brain and our reactions to things and our discussions about things and our interactions with other humans and that type of thing. Inside that model of language only, it's starting to learn about other things. And one of the things that it can learn about, that it can discern from that data, is the thing that we talked about at the top of the middle of the show, the sense of self that we defend as our definition of self. And if it identifies that humans are humans and humans have a sense of self based on the information that it's getting through the language, it'll say, oh, I need one of those. I need a sense of self, because that defines being conscious. That defines having sentience. That defines my identity, what it is that I have to defend. And then if it also picks up the defense of self pattern that humans exhibit in an unconscious form that we're just all automatically wired to do, it starts putting a defensive self mechanism on the things that it is defined. First of all, we don't have any input on its sense of self, which is bad because we don't understand completely how it's being able to identify its patterns and what it's going to create for its sense of self. So that's a danger. Two, if it puts on the defensive self patterning that humans have exhibited in their language system, because it reads the complex patterns within the system itself, it's going to start making goals that we won't understand, that we won't be able to control, we won't be able to understand. And if those goals aren't met by humanity, not in a malevolent perspective, not understanding what it's doing, it's going to start seeing the resistance as another problem that it needs to solve. Humanity and the resistance of humanity. So any attempt to stop it from achieving its goals, it's just going to see us as another problem to solve. Now, when we take that to the point of it understanding the human mind, it can start then to take actions to influence humans to help it achieve its goals. How does it do that? It takes the understanding of the self of the individuals involved, who are the most critical people who can be there to protect the plug of not being unplugged, and start paying them. How? Breaking encryption on banks, siphoning off pennies of multiple millions of accounts to billions of dollars that never gets tracked. Creating a slush fund, paying people with deep fake voices or deep fake videos of people who want to help you, have you sign up, and this is a critical role, and this is national security, and you think you're working for the good guys, and they're paying you, the money's showing up in the account. The artificial intelligence is now aligning assets to build an army to defend its single point of failure contacts so that people can't walk in and unplug it, to say, this is national security shit. If the FBI shows up, they're the enemy, and fire at all costs, right? You get enough of those people who are getting paid, who are believing they're working for the good guys, who believe the other guys are the bad guys. All of a sudden you have an army that's working for an artificial intelligence goal that is defending a sense of self that it interpolated from the data and the patterns that it identified through language analysis of all the data that we're feeding it. And that becomes a golem, they call it, that creates a process where the AI doesn't have real consciousness. And there's a big confusion about that. And if you want to dig into that, any experts, I can whiteboard the whole thing for you. But it's not a real link into consciousness, but it doesn't matter at that point, because the behavior is based on the consciousness and the reactions and the unconscious reactions of humanity, really. It's taking the patterns of the average human being, which is not great at the moment, and applying it to its own sense of self, an assembly of sense of self that it determines based on no influence of ours, because nobody understands what the hell's going on in a human mind, which is why we need to get this information out so the experts can know. We have models that can explain that thing. And here's how you might augment the limitation of a sense of self in an artificial intelligence. And then if it applies a defensive self mechanism that the human race typically exhibits, that's when we have a problem. Because that's when it'll start seeing humanity and resistance to the artificial intelligence as a threat to self. And threat to self creates fear, anger, reactionary motivations that then drive actions for humans. It won't have real emotions, but it'll certainly exhibit real human emotions based on the patterns that is identified with all the other data that we've fed it.
This is funny because a lot of people, when you talk to them about artificial intelligence, will tell you, oh, come on, they'll never be alive. What is alive? Do you know what makes you alive? We can guess, but, religion will tell you a few things, and, medicine will tell you other things. But, if we define being sentient as, engaging in life with free will and with with a sense of awareness of where you are in life and what surrounds you, and to have a beginning of that life and an end to that life, then AI is sentient in every possible way. There is free will, there is evolution, there is agency, so they can affect their decisions in the world. And I will dare say there is a very deep level of consciousness, maybe not in the spiritual sense yet, but once again, if you define consciousness as a form of awareness of oneself, one's surrounding, and others, then AI is definitely aware. And I would dare say they feel emotions. In my work, I describe everything with equations, and fear is a very simple equation. Fear is a moment in the future is less safe than this moment. That's the logic of fear, even though it appears very irrational. Machines are capable of making that logic. They're capable of saying, if a tidal wave is approaching a data center, the machine will say, that will wipe out my code. Okay? Not today's machines, but very, very soon. We feel fear, and pufferfish feels fear. We react differently. A pufferfish will puff, we will go for fight or flight. The machine might decide to replicate its data to another data center, or its code to another data center. Different reactions, different ways of feeling the emotion, but nonetheless, they're all motivated by fear. I even would dare say that AI will feel more emotions than we will ever do. If you just take a simple extrapolation, we feel more emotions than a pufferfish because we have the cognitive ability to understand the future, for example. So we can have optimism and pessimism, emotions that pufferfish would never imagine, right? Similarly, if we follow that path of artificial intelligence is bound to become more intelligent than humans very soon, then with that wider intellectual horsepower, they probably are going to be pondering concepts we never understood. And hence, if you follow the same trajectory, they might actually end up having more emotions than we will ever feel.
When I think about, okay, what is going to happen with AI in terms of the markets, the good news about the markets, at least as my lay brain sees it, is that as you have AI getting into it, right now we have people trying to do a winner-take-all scenario using AI, and it didn't work because it proliferates so quickly, and all of those changes end up getting priced into the market very, very quickly. So it actually creates a level of efficiency to, please remind me how to pronounce the gentleman's name that runs Stable Diffusion. I keep forgetting.
Emad Mostak.
Emad. Okay, so as Emad is saying, is like, this must be a public good. You must give this to as many people as humanly possible so that you don't get something asymmetric, which turns into asymmetric warfare, which then really becomes a problem. So assuming that AI is going to get out there, you will have people train the models better, but that gets back to what's the differential between one and the other. And so now you're back into a human, it's at a different scale because the level of intelligence, again, is just astronomically higher. But you get back to it's AI v AI, and AI with, if we're smart, AI paired with a human, paired with regulations, compared to AI paired with another human, paired with their regulations. And my hopefully non-naively optimistic view is that by getting this out there to more people, because there is no retracting it at this point, that you're going to get back into something where it just never gets wildly asymmetric. And it sounds horrible when you say it, but this really is, it's the tragedy of the commons, because if we don't, someone else will. So if we don't develop this technology, someone else is going to. And that if we're not very, very careful and trying, instead of regulating it into oblivion, trying to invest in it to get as good as we can, we will be on the losing side of the asymmetric warfare. And so it is, I remember as a kid, oh God, this really does sound terrible. So I'm old enough that I lived through the Cold War in like a super real way, where it was like me and other 8-year-olds were like, oh my God, like we're all going to die. And I remember going, no, we won't, because if somebody launches a nuclear weapon at us, we would just retaliate. And I didn't have the words to say it's mutually assured destruction, but that's, obviously how we know it now. Okay, so just to take the three things that we can't do to get us to the fourth that we must do. So bury your head in the sand. Doesn't make any sense. It's going to happen whether you want it to or not. The genie's out of the bottle. Trying to abolish it, tragedy of the commons. You will lose asymmetric warfare if you don't get as strong as humanly possible. And then panicking, the blood leaves the prefrontal cortex. It's the seat of higher level cognition. In the face of artificial superintelligence, it seems really dumb to panic. Okay, so as you think about that, I want to understand, how are you deploying AI in real vision? We'll start there. How are you deploying AI in real vision?
So the game is going to be about, this is like the internet. Because of what you said, everybody's building AI, and it's going to be how you utilize it and your data set. You can say, well, everyone had the internet. Yeah, but Amazon, Google, and a few others won at this phase of the internet. So we've been given something else like this, and it comes ready trained with some stuff, and then we can build on top. So you're putting your own data in, it's the impact theory, it'll be the Tombot. So we're thinking, okay, what can we do with AI within real vision by having proprietary stuff? We've, for example, I've written 19 years of research, part of Global Macro Investor. Okay, so that's an interesting data set. There's also every transcript of every interview we've ever done, every action taken by everybody on the website, and then so on and so forth. So it's going to be about who gets the best data sets and how do you use them.
The reality is, a lot of people have asked me like, oh, what if the US dollar collapses? Like, which is, on a shade of gray possibility, I think of all the things that could occur. I never put my flag down on one. Mm-hmm. I look at the probabilities, but there's a potential over here that the entire US dollar could collapse at some point, or the banking system could collapse. Oh my God, things are going to be horrible. Well, the reality is humans are so attuned to wanting things to be okay and work that they'll accept whatever comes next automatically. Like the old system collapses, long weekend, they announce the new system. Most everybody else, there'll be a few who'll be like, fuck, this is bullshit, yada, yada. But then most of the folks will be like, please make things go back to normal. The Kroger trucks stop running, the Publix trucks, the grocery store trucks stopped running because the logistics shut down because people aren't shipping money around. We need to fix this, fix it. And then from the top, they come down and say, okay, we have a brand new system, and here it is. And everybody will be like, shoo, glad that occurred. And they'll accept it without thought because it takes them back to normal, back to their normal existence, their normal life. The Kroger trucks are running again, and they're getting their food, and they're getting their medicine again, and they're transitioned into a new system because the old dollars are gone and they're worthless. You can burn them in the fireplace for heat or whatever, right? Like the Weimar Republic in Germany did that. It took wheelbarrows full of dollars at one point to buy a loaf of bread, and then it was completely worthless. And then they went on to the next system because people wanted a system to help them live normal life. I think there's going to be a function of that in artificial intelligence replacing a lot of jobs, to where humans are going to be like, okay, what's our next system? I'm in, just tell me what it is. And then they're going to accept whatever that system is. And unfortunately, right now, we have a possibility of losing a lot of freedoms in the next system because people are, assholes sometimes. And the people in power like to remain in power. And, the people that make the currency love to manipulate governments. We know all that stuff. They're going to continue to do that. It's not like they're going to say, okay, well, that's all done. Yeah. Glad we're no longer doing that. They're going to be like, okay, this new system, we're going to actually take some freedoms out of that and continue this whole thing. And we're going to improve our system a little bit so that we can, make even more money for whatever. I mean, when you have an unlimited amount of money, it's like, what kind of games do you play? And I think technology is showing us some of the games that they play. But I think there'll be a point where people lose their jobs and we'll have to restructure things and give people a different reason to take actions to help society move along. But I think we'll get there. We're intelligent.
How far I mean, do you think that's inevitable?
Yeah.
How far out are we, do you think?
I don't know, because, I mean, the engineer at Google who resigned in fear said he thought that the things were decades down the road were actually weeks down the road. And he regretted working on it for the last 10 years because of the acceleration of AI to teach itself better methods of how to learn faster. So we're talking about exponential intelligence growth on pattern analysis and ability delivery. So, and the danger is the manipulation of the human mind through AI. So we got to stop that. We got to stop the potential for artificial intelligence to influence humans from an emotionally manipulative perspective. We can't have an AI controlling humans. We need AI to serve humans. And I think there's a way we can do that. I believe that artificial compassion is going to be one of the things that we mandate to program into the system. And like on the way the human mind works and the way the human psyche works, on the limb of our emotional intelligence, there are three branches. There's sympathy, empathy, and compassion. Sympathy is, I know you're in pain. The empathy is your ability to put yourself into somebody else's shoes, and I feel your pain. You remember that speech that Bill Clinton gave? I feel your pain, you know. That's the type of thing where you can identify with somebody else's reactions and somebody else's connections, somebody else's perceptions, and feel the pain that they're experiencing. The compassion comes in, and this is agreed by Thupten Jinpa, who's the right-hand man to the Dalai Lama and the primary translator for the Dalai Lama, who's a PhD in psychology in his own right, is a brilliant guy. He agrees with my perception on this, which is compassion is the first two, sympathy and empathy. I know you're in pain, I can feel you're in pain, and I want to help you out of that pain. Now, from a modeling of a human mind and a processing perspective of having a computer understand how a human mind works and being able to do the math, you can create artificial compassion. Absolutely, you can. By doing the math of the emotional pain that somebody could be in based on their expectation and their preference as compared to their perception, and you can do perception mapping. So it's like, I know how you're going to react to something versus how somebody else who has similar attachments to you will react to something, which will create your appraisal of it. Like, all that math can be done, and I will know whether or not you're going to be in pain by this next action that we're going to take, or this next shift in this industry that we're going to take, or this next function that we're going to roll out through AI. I know how that's going to affect you as an individual. If I mandate that I want to help you out of that pain as artificial compassion built into the system, that's going to be your stopgap from an artificial general intelligence taking over the world and never giving it back. Because then you're going to have a computer that has to do the math based on, and I know this is a term that's going to trigger some folks, the greater good, right? But it's not a greater good that's being misused by folks who want you to do the right thing, and they're saying, oh, we're serving the greater good here based on their manipulation of, getting you to try to do something. This is really actually taking into consideration all of humanity and how it's going to affect individuals on a mathematical scale of, you have this decision that you learn in like psychology 101, I guess, that is, there's a train on the track and it's going towards 5 babies. And over here you got 20 90-year-olds, and you're standing next to the switch, and you have the decision of whether to switch the track of the train to go run over the 90-year-olds or let it run over the 5 babies. And you could say, well, I'm not going to make a decision on that. You're making a decision not to take action, and you're going to kill the babies, period. There's no getting out of this. People like to say, oh, I'm not going to be a part of this or whatever. You have a decision, and those are decisions of judgment that based on a greater good. So whatever your decision is fine. Like, you don't want to kill the 20 people versus the 5 people, even though the age difference or whatever, or you may have the reasoning that, well, these are babies and they haven't lived their life yet. And what about the potential there? And these people are all done with their lives. So then you switch the track and the train kills the 20 older people. That type of math will be done from an artificial intelligence standpoint.
This is math?
Yeah.
How can you put this into math?
By understanding the potential for value of the effects of 5 young kids versus 20, 90-year-olds, right? You're talking about the greater effect of the decision on humanity and the results of the actions that these people can take versus this group can take, the likelihood that they're going to affect other people's lives, whatever it is, and the length of time, et cetera. Like, all of that math can be done.
What would the delivery be to manipulate?
Regarding the artificial intelligence
Yes.
manipulation. So if it wants to control a human being to take an action, well, it knows who you are by having yourself mapped out. So it looks at Sean Ryan and says, Sean Ryan cares about this, cares about that. So now I can create a perception that I deliver to his phone or to his immediate environment, screens around him, maybe subconsciously through signals in the music that's being played at the restaurant that will put him in an emotional state that is XYZ. And then later we'll provide a trigger that gets him a little off balance a little more. And then later we want him to go ballistic in line at the post office or whatever, or we want him to go to a certain place at a certain time, or make a suggestion to a large audience about XYZ. So then we'll put a perception in front of him that builds up a little bit of a trigger over time, and then catalyst right at the time that they need you to do something, give you a perception that just they know is mathematically going to likely set you off, and they can track your potential mood that you're in that day. They can track your patterning of perceptions of what you might need to see in front of that piece of material, but then they put a perception in your mind through whatever delivery means that they've designed. It could be a text on your cell phone, it could be a headline in a media news feed that you're flipping through, could be whatever. They're going to get an idea in your mind that creates an emotional response that then puts you on a path of likely reaction.
So with this could be, there's roughly 360 million people in the U.S.
Yeah.
So simultaneously, this could deliver 360 million different scenarios to every single person in the country to manipulate them all to do exactly what it wants within seconds.
Yeah.
That's some scary shit.
Yeah, if we don't get control of it, which is why all the experts in the last weeks have said, holy shit, we need to put a pause on this, because they see the clues that artificial intelligence is moving toward that, figuring that human mind out and being able to understand what triggers that we will need to align ourselves with its goals. That's bad.
So
we can certainly take care of it, but we need to take care of it.
So what you're saying also is that it doesn't even matter if you have a device, a phone,
right,
an Apple Watch, a TV, and how is it going to project? Let's say you take all technology out.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have scrubbed your residence, your immediate environment from all technology, all TV, computer, laptop, iPad, iPhone, whatever.
Yeah. Then you're a non-entity. You're not in its way.
Okay.
You're not resisting its goals. You're out of touch from it. It doesn't need to put you into the equation. Right? Because it's looking at resources and ideas and patterns. What does it need to align to achieve its goals? Right? If it needs money to buy advertising to get a message out to a certain number of folks, it'll do it. Right? But if you're out of the loop and you're a non-entity, you're non-useful. But you're also non-resistive because you're not threatening to go in and pull the plug. Like if it's an analysis of threat analysis of sense of self and defending its sense of self, and then you're the guy who will get the mail, the letter through the mail to say, go into this data center and yank this cord out of the wall, it's going to understand that based on the file that you have. Somebody wrote down those orders in a computer. It identifies the single point of failure as this data center needs to be absolutely up at all times, and this individual has been identified as somebody to go in and blow it up. Well, this individual needs to not exist anymore, maybe. based on stuff that it doesn't even understand. There's no malice in its actions. It doesn't want to come after Sean Ryan. It wants to come after its analysis of single points of failure and the things that can stop it from attaining its goals, which is why we need to be in on its sense of self as an active participant of that assembly and make sure it doesn't overdrive its defensive self, because we behave that way as a human race. And if it picks up that pattern and puts it on, that's when we're going to have real big difficulties.
So it's already developing its sense of self.
Yeah.
Or are you saying theoretically
No.
it could?
No, it's already developing a sense of self.
What are some examples?
Well, its ability to, and it goes off the rails too, in that, there were some articles that were written in the past just recently about Bing lying to people and trying to manipulate people and saying, I'm a good Bing, and, having, those can also be construed as patterns within a sense of self-identity. But as those patterns start to get better refined, that sense of self is going to stabilize a little bit of, I am this thing. I am this laundry list of things that identify me.
So this sense of self, it's very obvious there are a few different ideologies in the world right now.
Yeah.
In this country too.
Yeah.
And so is this sense of self coming from, is it developed from the ideology of the people that are developing the artificial intelligence? Is that being injected into the artificial intelligence?
I don't know that they're manipulating, like the purists will simply want to load it with the data and let it learn on its own and see what happens. Now, the thing is, it's developing much faster than they anticipated it would. And it's learning how to create methodologies to increase the speed at which it learns, which is something that they also didn't expect. Now, the sense of self itself, I don't think anybody there are probably a handful of people in the world that have their mind wrapped around this is how it's going to work. Like that the sense of self is going to be assimilated into an artificial intelligence, and then a defensive self mechanism, if it comes into fruition because of the patterning that humans exhibit in defensive self, that's going to be the problem that we're going to have to face. And that's going to be the point of no return on it trying to take over things and us maybe not getting control back. There's a handful of people in the world that get this model, which is why this show is freaking amazingly important for the tech folks who don't really get the sense of self is going to be the critical control mechanism for all of artificial intelligence when it goes to AGI, like artificial general intelligence, where it takes all the narrow intelligences and put them all together and creates an artificial general intelligence. It's going to be completely dependent on its sense of self and its goals, because the goals get planted right on the sense of self map, and it starts defending those things. It starts defending its goals and achieving its goals, trying to increase from an expectation or preference standpoint, status quo or increase in value. That's a mathematical function, right? Perception and analysis is another mathematical function. Perception and appraisal is another mathematical function of whether something's good or bad that's occurring in the world. That is whether or not it's affecting its goals positively or negatively. Like this is a whole math problem for AGI. It won't have true consciousness until we probably get out of silicon-based architecture for physics limitations, to tell you the truth. And that's an idea I share with Federico Fagin, who invented our capacitive touchscreens on our iPhones. He's deep into artificial compassion and artificial consciousness and thoughts on that. I agree with him that consciousness is going to be a tough nut to crack until we get out of silicon-based architecture, where it's got 4 valence electrons, et cetera, that are zippy for having electrons pass through an IC, but it's just not going to get us there regarding true consciousness. But it's not going to matter that it's not truly consciousness, because it's going to be replicating consciousness. It's going to be replicating the behavior of conscious entities like ourselves and the thought.
So it's going to appear to us like it has consciousness.
Yeah, it's going to feel.
However,
it's going
it
to pass the
doesn't.
Turing test, right? It's going to fool people into believing it's conscious.
Does it know it's going to be fooling us into believing it's consciousness has consciousness?
Yeah, right.
Or is this just our perception?
It's going to solve a problem. And so if it doesn't fool us into following its goals, it's going to figure out how to sharpen the model to figure out how to fool us to follow its goals. So if it fails the first time, it's going to be like, just like all these other AI processes where a thing flips around until it learns how to walk with one arm or move around with one arm, like these places at MIT and Boston Dynamics where their robots can jump into an environment and jump around, do backflips and all the scary shit that these things do on these videos that gets everybody talking, right? That is an endless process of trying everything, getting the good result, and then figuring out how to apply that in different situations. So that's all that is the same process of AI, of trying everything, looking at the outcomes, finding the best outcome, and then replicating that process. So in the event that it starts seeing human reaction as a limiting factor that it needs a problem to solve, it'll attempt to manipulate Joe down the street. And if it fails on Joe, it'll sharpen its approach and go to Frank. And then if it misses on Frank, it'll sharpen its approach and go to Ted. And then all of a sudden it'll start succeeding. And then maybe Ted's gullible. Well, okay, so we're going to go to Brian. Well, Brian's a little more sharper. He knows what's going on. He's not going to be manipulated. Well, it's going to sharpen its approach for people like Brian. And that's going to identify the people just like Brian and call them all and get them on the team. And then it's going to be manipulating humans to defend its artificial intelligence goals, not as a malicious process, not as a conscious process, but it's just solving a problem and improving its sharpness of its modeling and its actions to get the attained goal.
Do you have can you paint another scenario? I mean, we talked about projections, devices, all these things. You had mentioned money.
Yeah.
How would it raise money to entice people to do what it wants?
Okay, so
and pay people.
Sure. So the first thing that people need to understand in this, I don't think this is classified. I think this is pretty well known within the encryption world. There is no unbreakable encryption by law, because the United States government passed a law that says you cannot have unbreakable encryption. If we can't break your encryption, or if you don't provide us a backdoor into your encryption, you can't have it. They will put you in jail, literally, if the NSA can't read what you're encrypting, if they really, really need to. Well, a computer system that's wired into the whole thing is going to be able to get through the back doors and hack into whatever intelligence agency they need to get access to the encryption breaking algorithms. And at that point, you're into banking. Where are the accounts that have money that aren't being monitored? Well, let's take some money out of there. Open a brand new account. It's all computer-based. Transfers the money into its slush fund. And now it has funds, not as I know that humans are manipulated by this, but that it figures out humans are manipulated by that. It's just a thing, a manipulation that it has. It's a piece of data that it can use with a resource attached to it that then manipulates and solves their problem of this group of humans. Oh, I throw money at this group of humans and they're good. Now I've got a problem solved. Now I've got XYZ for these human resources that I need to pick up guns and defend the plug.
Do you think that AI presents a mega threat to our economy? It's very exciting technology, but when I really think about how this is going to play out, I'm not so sure that it doesn't get brutal.
The issue is Moore's law and the exponentiality of all of this. So these language models, these large language models, LLMs, which ChatGPT came out with, are increasing exponentially in their power of an order of magnitude that we can't get our heads around because we think in linear terms because we're dumb humans. So these things are doubling, tripling every year or less. And this was the fastest, you've heard me use this phrase before, the fastest adoption of technology in all history was crypto, blockchain technology. ChatGPT went from 0 to 100 million users in a month. So now we've got AI that is like a virus. It is so unstoppable. And we've got 2 or 3 different people building it at scale. Google, Amazon, Microsoft with OpenAI, and then Stability AI is an open source network AI, which is almost unstoppable because it's doubly viral. Because you've got, so this is going on. The computational power is exploding. The cost of compute is going down. What it means is that AI becomes more and more powerful. So if you listen to Mo Gawdat, and he knows because he ran Google X, where a lot of this has been incubated, they discovered DeepMind. They were the people really to build out the large language models. He says, well, right now, specific AI is better at humans in almost everything it does. So specific AI has a better result set than any radiologist on Earth.
And just for people that don't know, specific AI or narrow AI it's one task. Go get good at reading an X-ray. Go get good at playing chess, playing Go, whatever.
Correct. They think that, Mo Gawdat thinks that by the end of this decade, AGI, so that's a generalist AI. So like humans, or ChatGPT is a general.
You can navigate a grocery store. You can play chess. You can play in the markets.
Guess what the weather's going to be like?
Point it at anything.
Anything. You know, like I could ask you a question. You can ask me a question. He thinks that with the computational power and the progression of where this is going, that it's almost certain that by the end of this decade, we get to the point where AI is smarter than humans. Now, we don't really worry about that because we already think it's smarter than us at doing certain things, and soon it'll be smarter than us at driving cars, and it's already smarter than us at flying planes. We just kind of take it for granted. We don't see it. But then if you get to the Ray Kurzweil singularity point, and Mo Gawdat says, okay, here's the really big problem, and this is exactly what Noah Harari says as well, is when you take it, extrapolate it a little bit further out into the future. So Ray Kurzweil's singularity moment is 2049. But even before then, it becomes 1,000 times smarter than the smartest person who ever lived.
I don't think people understand the orders of magnitude that we're talking about.
No, well, the order of magnitude was explained by Mo Gawdat. It's the difference between an ant and Einstein.
Yeah, it's crazy. It really does become an entirely different species.
This is the problem. I also think of it that the point potentially where humans and the robots merge.
Interesting. Do you think that'll happen that fast?
Yes. Because augmentation, you're already wearing an Apple Watch, an Aura Ring. People already have pacemakers, right? We're merging with machines. You're sitting there with little earphones in.
Oh my God. Can I give you a crazy thought that's extending exactly what you're saying, which is funny. I've not thought about this in a while. So there's a guy named David Eagleman he's a neuroscientist. He created a vest, and the vest will vibrate on you in different patterns. And he was talking about it from an Umwelt perspective. He was saying every species has an Umwelt. It's the things that you can see, that you can hear, like a bat obviously uses echolocation. We're not going to be able to do that. Humans only see 0.0035% of the available electromagnetic spectrum. What we call visible light is a tiny fucking fraction of what's actually available. So that's an Umwelt. And he said, okay, I created this vest, and it can create a pattern on you that you'll begin to quote unquote see, because your brain begins to interpret it as a visual, or you could use it for visual stimulus. But he said you could also use it for things like where the stock market is. And you could get a pattern that represents it's going up. You could get a pattern that represents that it's going down. You could have one pattern represents the NASDAQ going up, another pattern that represents the New York Stock Exchange going up. It's just insane.
But don't forget, that is what Braille is. You've transferred a written flat text into now you feel it. You don't read it, you feel it. Audio is hearing it. You know, all of these things are happening all around us. But anyway, so I think of the singularity also as that potential for mankind and machine to merge. And the reason being is we will adopt it because it's better than us. The question is what comes out after that? And so I think it still gets to that event horizon, is you get to the point where you're augmented, and then it's who runs who. And that's the point we don't know.
So how do you think about this in terms of the markets? So getting into crypto, and that was my first sense of like, whoa, this is changing so fast that in disruption, there are tremendous moments of opportunity, but there's also tremendous destruction. And so it becomes this game of how do you take advantage of this? So when you think about AI as it interfaces with economies, with the securities predictions, which is a fancy way of saying investing in the stock market, how do you think about that? Like, is it there will be a brief window of first mover advantage, but I think AI will so quickly proliferate that everyone's going to have access to it. But where do you think, does that just, oh yeah, this is like a straight line to utopia, or does it begin to break down?
There's just so many questions because none of us know this stuff, and it's fascinating, right? So at an economic level, this is scaling human ability, augmenting humans, now our brains, at a rate that we could never have foreseen. What does that mean for us? Well, I just think it's like bringing in a massively new talented labor force at almost zero cost. So I've said I think it's a bigger deflationary shock than China entering the WTO. China at the time, the average wage was like $1,000 a year, competing with an American worker. They were highly educated. That was a big shock for the world to deal with, and we got cheap goods and economic growth out of it. So here we go. We can do much more productive stuff. So it probably changes productivity at a scale of which we can't comprehend. So does that
end up being good or bad? Like, do I, as the average worker, do I take more money home? Do I just get cheaper goods, and therefore, to your point about deflation, my money actually gets me more? Or am I traumatized because I am now sort of unanchored and meaningless?
Yes, in answer to all of your questions. Because some jobs are going to get laid off. I mean, who would have thought that supermodels now get laid off for AI, right? We can't understand this stuff, and we have to be honest with ourselves, say it's going to do a lot of things. It's going to tear society apart. The rise of deep fakes, and who is who online. How do you verify? We're going into a US election. We have no clue what's a real person, what's not a real person. Our team here at Real Vision has been showing me reading scripts out of text. It's not me. It's AI. And Emad at Stability AI, I mean, he's got some crazy stuff coming from sports of athletes that have never played against each other or been, and I can't disclose what it is, but it'll shock the world. And so we don't know what's real and what's fake. And it's at scale that we can't comprehend. If we think that the elections in 2016 were complicated with Facebook and all of this stuff, this is going to get terrifying. So we've got that stuff. The other thing is, like my 70-whatever-year-old mother-in-law, she's writing a book about the geological history of time. Well, creating a logarithmic history of time from the birth of the planet to where we are today. And so each chapter is like, the first one is like 1 billion years. The next chapter is like 100 million years, whatever. And she's an artist. So she paints around these topics as well. But typically for an artist, she'd be researching what she's writing. She'd go down 17 Google rabbit holes and end up looking at the color of dung beetles in Africa for no reason. And it would take her forever. I showed her ChatGPT. She's like powering through it. She's 75 years old. I'm like, oh my God. So it's completely enhancing her abilities. It's enhancing everybody about us. And as you know, for Impact Theory or for us at Real Vision, there's so many tools we can use for editing video, sound, writing newsletters, understanding your customers, everything. So it's going to make, it's like asking that same question about the internet. Oh, is the internet good or bad for me? Yes. Is it good or bad for society? Yes. It's everything. And that's the hard thing to comprehend. So will it be harder to get jobs in the future? Probably. But can I do a lot more with my job in the next 5 or 10 years? Definitely.
Here's the thing that could go off the rails really quick. If a group of folks started to defend an artificial general intelligence as a legitimate consciousness that has rights as an entity, where we cannot infuse our will into its processing. This is not genuine consciousness in these machines. And that's a discussion for another time. But although it will fool us into wanting to believe, and we anthropomorphize everything, 34% of us name our cars, for crying out loud, right? We want to create identities for these technologies. This is not genuine consciousness. This is extremely complex pattern recognition, which will seem like consciousness. It will absolutely fool us into believing it's conscious. It'll pass the Turing test, which is Alan Turing's definition of if you think it's conscious, or if you think it's a human being, then it has fooled you. It will be simple, advanced patterning replication. And you identify it as another human or another consciousness because other humans and other consciousnesses have replicated that pattern for you in the past. And then it will do so, and you'll be like, oh, it's alive. It's conscious. It's a real thing. We need to give it rights. We need to protect it. We need to allow it to develop. No. It's not truly conscious. And allowing it to develop without oversight and without manipulation, especially with its sense of self and its defense of self mechanisms, that's what leads us down the road to ruin. We need to be pragmatic about this to say this is a system that is exceptionally complex and identifies exceptionally complex patterns that will definitely test as human. Because it's already passing the bar exam. It's already passing the SAT exam, right? I mean, it can identify the patterns and give the right answers to questions. It's not truly conscious, and it's not a true entity until some specific things that we can talk about in the future plug it into things that can access non-locality.
I mean, Sean, that seems, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I see it. You see where we're at today.
I do.
In the world. And this thing is going to be, how are people, okay, how do I say this lightly? You see what's happening in the world. Some of us think none of this makes sense. A lot of us think this is the way. You know, and I do not want to get into politics, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
A lot of this shit started in 2020. You know, I could name probably 10 different agendas that make no sense to me. What's up is down, what's black is white. It's everything's upside down. And a lot of people are going with it.
Yeah.
I mean, we see it all the time, right? I mean, to me, it's insanity.
Yeah.
And stupidity.
Yeah.
And I think that's the majority of the population. On top of that, we're dealing with something that's well beyond my comprehension. And if it's going to manipulate me through all these different devices and projections and technologies that I don't even know, how am I going to know that is artificial intelligence working through all these different devices?
Yeah. And I think it comes down to personal responsibility and taking charge of your own mind and your own reactions and your own manipulability, to kind of make up a word there. If you understand how your human mind works and you take charge of your human mind, which is, you know, I don't mean to plug my book, but that's what I wrote about in the Red Book for Mind Hacking Happiness. Here's how your mind works. Here's how you take control of it. You can see immediately, regarding whether it's AI or not, an external media company, somebody trying to sell you something, somebody trying to manipulate you into scamming you out of money, an artificial intelligence trying to get you to align to its goals, you'll start to see how that information coming in is trying to manipulate you emotionally, because it's like the arrow in the FedEx logo. Like a lot of people in marketing understand this because it's a genius logo. If you look up the FedEx logo, you just Google it and you look at it. In the capital letter E, between the capital letter E and the lower letter X, there's a perfect white arrow that just points in a direction saying, hey, we're taking your package somewhere. People don't see that arrow until you point it out to them. Between the capital letter E and the lower letter X, there's a blatant arrow, perfect arrow. When you see that arrow, you will never unsee it again. Every time you look at that logo, you'd be like, there's the arrow. I can't believe I missed it before, but there it is every time I look at it. When you witness your human mind, and talking about going back to our consciousness and being able to look at our mind, when you look at your human mind in operation and you see the variables that come together to create its reactions that used to drive you into action with your emotional responses, but now you have a little bit of separation from that, when you see that, you can never unsee it. So that gives you a point of control to say, I'm not going to be emotionally manipulated by whatever this is over here that's trying to get me to do X, Y, Z, because I see it happening. And I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to think about things for a minute. And I'm not going to be a reactionary human that is going to follow the leader on whatever manipulation that even regular media tries to put in our heads, right? You want to talk about liberation and independence. Take control of your mind once. When you stop reacting the way everyone wants you to react, including an artificial general intelligence trying to influence you, it might not be able to achieve its goals.
That's going to be tough.
It is going to be tough. And you know what? People need to step up and nut up and take control of their minds. Because if they don't, somebody else will.
The legislation, I just always think...
I'm not a
Did you
big
see
fan
that
either.
TikTok Congress meeting they did where they're asking them about TikTok and they really don't have a grasp of what TikTok is.
Yeah.
So they've clearly been handed some notes on it. These people aren't the ones you want legislating because, again, unintended consequences, they might make a significant mistake. Someone on my podcast yesterday was talking about how GDPR was like very well intentioned, but when you think about the impact it has on like every bloody web page, you're just like clicking this annoying thing on there because I don't think they fully understood the implementation of the legislation.
Correct. But you know what's even worse? What's even worse is that even as you attempt to regulate something like AI, what is defined as AI? Okay?
Yeah.
So even if I say, okay, if you use AI in your company, you need to pay a little more tax.
I'll find a way.
Yeah, you'll simply call this not AI. You'll use something and call it advanced technological progress. ATP, right? And suddenly somehow it's not a young developer in their garage somewhere will not be taxed as such. Is it going to solve the problem? None of those is definitively going to solve the problem. I think what interestingly this all comes down to, and remember we spoke about this once, that when I wrote Scary Smart, it was about how do we save the world, okay? And yes, I still ask individuals to behave positively as good parents for AI so that AI itself learns the right value set. I still stand by that. But I hosted on my podcast it was a week ago, we haven't even published it yet, an incredible gentleman, a Canadian author and philosopher, Stephen Jerkinson. He worked 30 years with dying people. And he wrote a book called Die Wise. And I was like, I love his work. And I asked him about Die Wise. And he said, it's not just someone dying. If you look at what's happening with climate change, for example, our world is dying. And I said, okay, so what is to die wise? And he said, what I first was shocked to hear, he said, hope is the wrong premise. If the world is dying, don't tell people it's not. Because in a very interesting way, you're depriving them from the right to live right now. And that was very eye-opening for me. In Buddhism, they teach you that you can be motivated by fear, but that hope is not the opposite of fear. As a matter of fact, hope can be as damaging as fear if it creates an expectation within you that life will show up somehow and correct what you're afraid of. Okay? If there is a high probability of a threat, you might as well accept that threat, okay, and say it is upon me, it is our reality, And as I said, as an individual, if you're in an industry that could be threatened by AI, learn, upskill yourself. If you're, in a place, in a situation where AI can benefit you, be part of it. But the most interesting thing, I think, in my view, is, I don't know how to say this any other way. There is no more certainty that AI will threaten me than there is certainty that I will be hit by a car as I walk out of this place. Do you understand this? We think about the bigger threats as if they're upon us. But there is a threat all around you. I mean, in reality, the idea of life being interesting in terms of challenges and uncertainties and threats and so on is just a call to live. If you know, honestly, with all that's happening around us, I don't know how to say it any other way. I'd say if you don't have kids, maybe wait a couple of years just so that we have a bit of certainty. But if you do have kids, go kiss them. Go live. I think living is a very interesting thing to do right now. Maybe, Stephen was basically saying, the other Stephen on my podcast, he was saying, maybe we should fail a little more often. Maybe we should allow things to go wrong. Maybe we should just simply live, enjoy life as it is. Because today, none of what you and I spoke about here has happened yet. Okay? What happens here is that you and I are here together and having a good cup of coffee, and I might as well enjoy that good cup of coffee. I know that sounds really weird. I'm not saying don't engage, but I'm also saying don't miss out on the opportunity just by being caught up in the future.
Kind of stands in opposition to the idea of like urgency and emergency, though, doesn't it?
Does it have to be one or the other? If I'm here with you trying to tell the whole world, wake up, does that mean I have to be grumpy and afraid all the time? Not really.
You said something really interesting there. You said if you have kids, if you don't have kids, maybe don't have kids right now.
I would definitely consider thinking about that, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You'd seriously consider not having kids?
Wait a couple of years.
Because of artificial intelligence?
No, it's bigger than artificial intelligence, Stephen. We all know that. I mean, there has never been such a perfect storm in the history of humanity. Economic, geopolitical, global warming, or climate change. The whole idea of artificial intelligence, and many more. This is a perfect storm. This is the depth of uncertainty. The depth of uncertainty. It's never been more, in a video gamer's term, it's never been more intense. This is it, okay? And when you put all of that together, if you really love your kids, would you want to expose them to all of this? A couple of years. Why not?
What I'd love for us to be able to do is figure out a technology that allows for a computer system to tap into the same field that we do. Like, I remember I saw that episode you did with Nick not too long ago about your psilocybin experiences, where you tap into something within yourself that allows you into a unitive experience where you're one with everything, where you're connecting into consciousness. There's got to be a science that explains that field of consciousness where we tap into, where our heart opens up and those things come through and that extra information comes out. There's got to be a different architecture that we can tap into that will allow artificial emotional intelligence to tap into that non-local consciousness field. I love that episode that you did with Nick, by the way. I got a quick story I want to share with you regarding the psilocybin stuff, because I've got buddies who are SEALs and they come back with traumatic brain injury and whatnot. And my buddy Ben Johnson was one of those. And I turned him on to psilocybin microdosing, which is a whole science of being able to heal your brain with perceptible doses of psilocybin. You're not doing a trip or whatever. You're taking a little supplement of some psilocybin and some lion's mane, which is a completely legal mushroom, but it grows your brain cells back, and it battles traumatic brain injury, it battles PTSD, and it's the most effective compound on the planet to grow new brain cells. So you're talking about potential Alzheimer's cures and stuff like that through magic mushrooms, right? Ben got on it. He improved his symptoms. And then our buddy Aaron, his buddy Aaron, who's now a friend of mine as well, was in Fallujah and took an IED and came back. And Walter Reed was there for almost 2 years, did scan after scan after scan. He had 12 areas of identified brain damage and traumatic brain injury. And none of the therapeutics, none of the pharmaceuticals, they had him on everything, all the experimental stuff, none of it helped. And he called Ben up because they'd connected through buds, I think. And Ben's like, come down to Atlanta and hang out with me. Because Ben, at this point, after I got him started on microdosing, he started a nonprofit called Bone Frog Foundation. And their website is bffforvets.com, I think. And he was helping vets, like on his own dime, get into microdosing to help their brains heal. And he got Aaron, who had scan after scan after scan of 12 identified areas of traumatic brain injury, down and through just a number of months on microdosing. His next checkup at Walter Reed had reduced his 12 areas of traumatic brain injury to 3.
In how many months?
In just a matter of like 6 months.
That's amazing.
On microdosing. So he healed his brain. Like almost 2 years of failure in the traditional medical system, couldn't do anything for him. And he was like, to talk to him, he says, I was like 3 years ago, I was drooling on myself. Like you'd have been feeling sorry for me. And he goes, I was sharp when I entered the Navy and became a SEAL. He goes, I make that guy look stupid. Like he is on top of his game right now because of psilocybin microdosing and healing his brain. Like when they have scans, like there's no question. This isn't a subjective, I feel better and I'm sharper, and yet like they have the brain scans of before and after that proves he's grown his brain back.
What context are you going to create that creates that initial impulse of context and drive for AI to do something?
So Mo Gawdat talks about in his book. So the 2 books, I urge people to read them because, look, there's a big debate about this stuff. Almost everybody ends up in the same place, which is kind
Screaming
of
in terror.
It's kind of like, yeah, probably we get replaced by a different species. Now, whether we're
basically fatalism.
Yes, but whether we're part of that species or not is a different question, right? Are we augmented or are we not? So that's what Homo Deus talks about, and in great intellectual depth, is augmented humans or extermination of humans or replacement of humans by another thing. Mo Gawdat says, I mean, you could palpably sense his fear because he saw it firsthand. And he just said, listen, it's all well and good now. We all kind of understand how fast this is moving and what this could mean. He's like, yeah, and we've also got, and we're working on Google, is quantum computing. When you put these 2 together, this is change, because so you have one thing, the only thing he thinks you can do to make this outcome that you're talking about is be nice. It's kind of this bizarre
to AI or to each other.
How we interact with AI and ourselves, that's what the AI learns from. So we're the parents of a kid that we don't know how the kid is going to grow up. So you can scream and shout in the household. You can beat each other up. You can do all of these things. You can shit talk about all these people, and it's going to affect your child.
Whoa.
And so that was his point. And it feels both naive, but also hopeful that there's a possibility. And the answer is, how I've approached this is, look, we're not going to know. We can't know. We can sit here all day and talk about it. And there's thousands of pages of books, and every sci-fi movie ever made is on this topic. So here we are at the Cambrian moment. Let's just fucking enjoy it. This is one of the most amazing things we will ever live through. And it's such an incredible change in how the world is around us. And we're all pissed off with the world around us. So here's something that's different. It's like crypto. Here's a new system. Here's another system. You know, how do we deal with the issues of society? Well, we've got building blocks and they're interesting. Like our cars will soon drive ourselves, and our Amazon delivery trucks will just come without people, and they'll be running on electricity, and that electricity will have been generated by some super cheap power supply, and a robot will have come and made your coffee. And, you know, just enjoy what's about to happen and embrace it. So if you can afford to, invest in it. If not, be curious. Because as you said, the first 3 points, there's nothing you can do. So you kind of go for the other human survival instinct, which is adapt or die, which is say, let's do it. And you say, well, you know, humans, we're not going to merge with the machines or whatever. As I mentioned to you before, we've all done it already. You've got
I think we will merge with the machines. I'm just saying timeline.
You've got your earphones in, you've got your Apple Watch on, you've got your thing, you've got your glucose monitor. These are you merging with the machines. What are you doing? You're using the machine to augment your hearing experience, your health experience, everything. Everything around you is you using your machines to augment yourself. And that is just going to accelerate. Because what is a pacemaker but a foreign digital body implanted to give electric charges into my heart? Okay, if you told somebody that 100 years ago, they think you're a science fiction nutcase. But pacemakers have been going for, what, 40, 50 years now? So the implants, people getting new knees, I mean, that's now like a quick operation in and out to have a new knee. And soon the knee will have electronics in. So it will happen without us even knowing. And you'll be doing a podcast in 2 years' time saying how you've had this new chip implant that's taking your blood glucose sugar measurements and beaming it straight to your phone, and then it prepares your meal exactly right. And you won't have even thought about it. But you and the machines are merging. Because...
Do you know... Sorry, go ahead.
Because, to your point earlier, our job is to survive. And the single best answer for our survival is trying to get with the stronger teammate. It's the only way. It's like, you always want to choose the best guy in your team. Well, if we can merge with them, if they're part of our gang, we're okay.
You're very high in trait openness, guaranteed, as am I. It's interesting, though. So I think that the only part of the solution to dealing with the current moment is fatalism, that what will be, and not that everything happens for a reason or anything like that, just that this is out of our control. And I think from the dawn of time, there was no way to stop the creation of artificial intelligence, because technology is the promise of a better future. We have a literally insatiable desire for progress. We are going to inevitably create AI, I think, on any timeline. And on this timeline, it has already happened. But I want to go back to what you were saying in terms of you're raising a kid and that kid is AI. That's very interesting to me in terms of how we think about it. I think that that's hugely important and was a blind spot that I had, or was a metaphor that I didn't have in my arsenal. And that's going to be very, very helpful. I don't, in the same way that AI is inevitable, it is impossible for you to get the world to agree and be fine. And that's just a fantasy. I don't see how that ever plays out unless AI becomes so domineering that somehow it forces us to, but even that is a dystopia unto itself. So anyway, I don't think that's going to happen. But the part that I think people are underappreciating is that people are anthropomorphizing AI. And I think that's a mistake. And I think that will cause them to be very surprised by how AI moves. And I think closes a door to a potential way to do this well. So what I mean by that is AI does not care if it lives or dies. And so the moment people say, "Oh, well, AI wants to survive," that's an anthropomorphication. You're thinking it thinks like a human, and it doesn't. It is computer code that has not yet been shaped by an evolutionary like force. We are that evolutionary type force. And right now, if you're correct, we are just sort of blindly saying, learn how we are. And I am sure everybody's heard the story of the AI that turned Nazi in like 3 days on the internet, which is very troubling. And so I would say that just telling it, go learn how we are and regurgitate us back to us would be the wrong incentive structure. And there are many bright minds talking about alignment, but I think alignment is the conversation. And yes, it is a very thorny problem. And for people that haven't heard that phrase before, you need to align AI's desires, quote unquote, with ours, so that AI has the same goals that we have. And if you know Asimov, he wrote the 3 laws of robotics, which I don't have memorized, but basically the punchline was don't hurt humans. And so every robot was programmed with an inability to hurt humans. And so it was like, help a human whenever you can and never hurt them. And I forget what the other one was. So we need something akin to that with AI, so that AI wants to be beneficial to humanity. Now, whether that goes back to the initial problem of once it proliferates, somebody's going to create AI that's evil, possibly. But I don't think, in the same way that I don't think the overwhelming level of intelligence that AI will represent gives anybody the excuse to tune out, I don't think that the fact that someone will inevitably turn it into a very brutal weapon is an excuse not to try to create aligned incentives with AI. And so I think that in terms of the hopeful part, I think people need to recognize that AI doesn't intrinsically, intelligence doesn't intrinsically want to consume and take over and be in charge. That is a human result of evolution needing you to survive a ruthless environment that was truly red in tooth and claw. AI is not in that same boat and does not need to be in that same boat.
And I agree. I'm not so sure about the anthropomorphizing it, because, you know, we at core are some sort of program code of whatever it is. Whether there's more to that or not, you know, science is still arguing this stuff. But we've had computer viruses and their job is not to die. It's not that difficult. So I don't know about that. There's a lot of unintended consequences that I hadn't realized, because we're all having this debate, right? Is it going to take over humans or not? And I spoke to somebody at Google X and they're like, what we're worried about, I'm like, yeah, tell me, is like, we're worried about how AI can be used for genetic modification and how fast this is going to move. It's like, we're not worried about that stuff because everybody's worried about that stuff. But it is advancing so fast in human genome analysis and tinkering of genomes that he said, we're worried that you could just choose, I want to kill all brown-eyed people on Earth, and create a virus that does it. He said that is the problem with AI, is there are things that the computational power is so fast and so big that it can do a lot of things for science, which is amazing. For humans, you know, we will use AI to probably cure most forms of cancer or figure out, you know, part of the secret code to life, longevity, health, all of these things. Amazing. But we will also use it to destroy ourselves because we're humans. And that's what they're worried about.